Our next speaker is Ahmed Rehab, Executive Director of CAIR-Chicago.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me. I want to thank the committee, Chairwoman Rodriguez Sanchez, and Alderman Lopez for the invitation and for your leadership. My name is Ahmed Rehab. I'm the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations here in Chicago, a civil rights organization representing Muslim communities and other minorities in the city. It is a chapter and office of a national organization that is the largest Muslim civil rights organization in the country. I'm here in my capacity both as a leader in the civil rights movement for 20 years now and a leader of the Muslim American community here in the Chicagoland area, speaking from my expertise and experience in both fields, both areas. There are two things to discuss when we're talking about what is happening with Mahmoud Khalil and other students and other immigrants, green card holders, visa holders, etc., particularly as it relates to the Israel-Palestine situation. There's the content of the speech, and there's the principle of the matter. Let me begin with the content for a second. I want you to imagine 174 children filling this room. Seat them wherever you like. Some of them will have to stand. It'll be a full house. That's how many children were killed just yesterday. Not 50 years ago, not 100 years ago, not last year, just yesterday, in the very thick of this conversation, by the state of Israel on the orders of its Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And many more hundreds were killed. I'm just mentioning the children because there's no question about whether they're terrorists. There isn't a question about civilians being terrorists either, but let's just make it very simple and clear. Now, this is not something that happened in a vacuum. It's been happening for the last year and a half. As a matter of fact, between 60,000 and 160,000 civilians have been killed, according to which reports you look at, in what has been deemed a genocide by the United Nations, by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, by Israeli genocide experts and others. I say this because that is what Mahmoud Khalil and others have been standing up against. That is what they've been protesting. That is what the student encampments have been about. And they've been Muslims and Palestinians, whites, blacks, Latinos, Asians, and Jews in the leadership, in the front lines of this American movement, student movement against genocide committed by a foreign government that has been using our tax dollars to kill innocent people. So what we're seeing is gaslighting. This person who should be receiving an award for the human rights advocacy that he's doing in a very difficult environment is being penalized by a weaponized immigration system to politically persecute him and render him a political prisoner. He was abducted, he was detained without due process, without a crime, not charged with a crime. As was mentioned, it is simply that his actions, his speech, is disliked by those in power. That is what we see in previously in the Soviet Union, in communist China, in Russia, in Assad's Syria. That is not what the United States of America is about, and what we're seeing now is a threat to bring us into space that we've never been in, at the behest of essentially lobby groups that serve a foreign agenda. And what we're seeing today, and this is very important to understand, is the deliberate conflation of standing up against genocide and human rights abuses with anti-Semitism. And I mentioned, as a civil rights leader in the city, I've had the pride and the honor of fighting not just against Islamophobia and racism, but also anti-Semitism, hand in hand with my Jewish colleagues. And so we know the difference between actual bigotry against Jews that generalizes against them and the criticism of the actions of adults who are responsible human beings who hold political and public office. The latter will never be deemed a form of bigotry. It is holding them accountable for their choices and their actions. It does not append their actions to their religion or identity, but to their souls and their own decision making. And so what we are seeing, and I want to be very clear, is a direct attack on American democracy, namely agenda-driven, often foreign agenda-driven lobby groups attempting to and often succeeding in weaponizing U.S. taxpayer-funded government agencies and entities, institutions to isolate, falsely accuse, and criminalize Americans for the critique of war crimes in Gaza. These entities and agencies and institutions include the White House itself, the Senate, the House, ICE, the FBI, the Justice Department, and the Department of Education. And there are groups here in Chicago and elsewhere that are also mobilizing to turn schools and universities against their students in the same way that they've turned the government against its citizens for the mere critique of a foreign government killing innocent people. That is what we're facing. And so I fully support this resolution. I think it is a moral imperative on all of us to demand the release of this political prisoner, to speak out against the weaponization of government, of the immigration system, to penalize people for their political speech because the president doesn't like it, and to ensure that we all stand against forms of bigotry, but not to conflate the actions and the accountability and the responsibility of people with their identities. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Let that be very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I remember